What is up, Brad fans? How are we all doing? And I hope you are, in fact, Brad fans, because we are going back to the original, back to what started it all, almost 3 years ago. Two Brads talking about science. That's right, my esteemed co host, British Brad, is back for this episode. And we took a break from Corona, so don't expect too much Corona. Obviously, we had to address it a little bit off the top, but no, we're back to what we're doing, what we do, doing what we love to do, and that is bringing you weird science stories that we find throughout the course of our regular forays into the science news, and bringing those to you. So you'll hear about some disease stuff. Couldn't leave the disease world completely. We'll talk about some new memory pathways that were found. Why are dogs' noses wet and cold? A study about traffic jams, modeling traffic jams, and miracle hangover drug. Bet you didn't see that coming. Could be of use for some of you who are making it through quarantine any way you can. So, hope you enjoy it, folks. As always, please do rate, subscribe, comment to us on wherever you're getting your podcast, wherever you're getting this podcast. I have seen that some of you have done that, and thank you very, very much for doing so. Also, reach out to us on Twitter or Instagram at 2brad4you. The same handle for both accounts, at 2brad4you. Let us know what you think of the show. Comment, get in touch, whatever it may be. And like I said, hit that subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts. It really helps us out. And having said all that, having plugged all that, let's get into it.
Hello, welcome listeners. Welcome, saying "be rad" at me, but I don't know who that is. I'm going to go back to calling you Flash. Welcome, Flash. How are you?
Pretty good, my friend. Pretty good. Maintaining safe distances from everyone, including my wife. That's not by choice.
Yeah.
That's not by choice. But no, we're good. We're good over here. How are you doing on the island fortress?
Yeah, surviving. Obviously, we dabbled, and we'll just tell the listeners we're not going to dive into coronavirus. So I think everyone's had enough of that. And it'll be with us for weeks to come, so we can always pick it up. But yeah, no, not been too bad. Obviously, as an island, we tried to do things a little bit differently and tried to hold herd immunity to kick things off. And what that seemed to do is just thin the herd rather than actually confer any sort of immunity. So we quickly ditched that scheme, and now it's really paying dividends for us. But yeah, otherwise good. Obviously, as a show, Flash, we've been socially distancing for quite a while because there's at least 500 miles between us. So
at least,
yeah. So you and I are perfectly safe, and I've got antivirus software on my laptop that I'm using to stream and record this with. So I'm hoping that will mop up most of the things. I'm all over this.
Well, we're not using 5G, right? And that's really what's transmitting the virus. So we're safe.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on dumb bastards of the world. Hopefully none of them are our listeners. I would hope not. I think our listeners are a more educated bunch. But let's see.
Maybe not. Tweet at us and let us know.
Yeah, let us know. And hopefully, listeners, you're all safe. And although we're trying to make light of the situation, obviously it is serious. So please heed the advice. Stay safe. We don't have that many listeners as it is. Christ knows we don't want to lose any. So,
could you imagine?
Yeah, wash your hands, stay indoors. You wrap yourself in cotton wool that's been doused in bleach. I would hope. Keep yourself self listeners, because we've invested a lot of time and effort into getting you. To lose you to some poxy pandemic virus would be a real kick in the balls. So
it'd be a real shame. And so then, if you do get it, we just ask that you then tell at least 2 to 3 people about the show.
From a safe social distance, so Flash, because we don't want to then spread the virus and kill other listeners.
Well, if you're going to be spreading the virus, just spread the show along with it, is all I would say.
We can only dream that our popularity would spread as fast as this virus, Flash. That's basically the dream, isn't it, really, for you and I? Yeah.
We've been working at it. You know what I saw the other day? Before we get rolling here, I got one more thing, a little trip down memory lane, because we're approaching 50 episodes.
I thought we were already at 50 episodes. I had a party 3 weeks ago for 50 episodes. Are we not at 50 episodes?
No, I don't think so yet by our official, what we've labeled numbered episodes. Although I've done a few different episodes.
Don't say we. I get quite a lot of abuse from a couple of the listeners saying, "Oh, have you given up on the podcast?" Because Flash seems to be, it's no longer two Brad for you. It's just Brad for you, is what it is.
And it is Brad. It is very Brad for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's the numbering scheme is a little off, but we're going to be approaching 50. But also the other day, I was recording an episode without you, and noticed that it was almost 3 years to the day that we started this little thing. So I think it was like April 4th, somewhere in there, beginning of April 2017, we started this little venture. And look where we are.
Well,
maybe 10 listeners.
Yeah, at best. And, I always listen back to the episodes. So, you can take one off of that. And I actually download it onto 3 of my devices just to push. So actually, we're probably just you and I, Flash. I don't think anyone's probably listening to this, but
yeah,
you and I are effectively I Am Legend right now, broadcasting to nobody in the vain hope there's somebody still alive out there listening.
Dude, we've been practicing for this pandemic for 3 years, basically.
And we'll continue for another 3 years.
Yeah, that's right. All right, well, let's get back then to what we do best, what we've honed over the last 3 years. We've honed this craft of talking about different science stories in a way that makes us seem somewhat informed and hopefully somewhat entertaining. Again, we have no listeners, so we'll never know. However, jumping from the giant elephant in the room that we said we're not going to hammer on too much about, let's talk about our second favorite disease.
Ooh, herpes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I genuinely was not expecting that.
Well, that's what they all say, Flash, when they get it.
Yeah. No, I was going to say Ebola got pushed to number 2 in our ranking because of,
I didn't even know Ebola was still a thing. Is that still a thing?
Alas, it is, unfortunately. Okay. So the what was it? The North Kivu outbreak. So the one that's been going on in Congo for probably like a year and a half now, or just over a year or something now. We obviously had been following it, and it had more or less died down in the beginning of the year to sort of February, March. The case numbers were dropping. It was really positive. Everything was positive. It was heading in the right direction. And I think that it was, if they got to April 12th, maybe 14th, somewhere around there, with no new cases, then they could officially declare the outbreak over. And then in the last couple days, it's the 14th, right? No, it's the 13th right now. There's been a couple cases, so 2 cases. So that's unfortunate. The outbreak there continues. And so just a reminder that not all outbreaks other outbreaks are still. Yeah, exactly. And I think it just kind of goes to show too that that we'll forget about a lot of things because of the current situation, which is not a good thing, because some of these, as Corona moves into Africa and India and other parts of South America and stuff, there's going to be a lot of competing factors going on, which could make Corona a lot worse. So it's something to keep in mind. And I think it's like something that I would hope that would come out of this whole situation is just like greater awareness of these things, and that we need to work together. Countries need to work together to figure out, treatment.
Any one particular country there, Flash, with that?
There's a few I could name. There's a few you could name, but yeah.
I think you're right. I think for me, what would be interesting, and as we touched on before we started recording, you just touched on there, and a lot of things are going to change from this point going forward in the world. And I think it'll be interesting to look back on Ebola numbers and things and other disease things to see, well, have the measures that we've taken to control coronavirus actually had a positive knock-on effect, hopefully, on the spread of Ebola or other illnesses, because I think we are going to see that, the social distancing, or whatever it's called where you're from. Well, I know different countries call it different places, don't they? So different things. So,
Yeah.
but it'll be interesting, I think, to look back, once we've done the post-mortem on everything coronavirus related, what's the knock-on effects? Have we seen other illnesses, be limited in their spread because of that? And I think Ebola will be a key one. Obviously, it seems a lot more virulent the way it spreads, as opposed to coronavirus. But
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Ebola's harder to catch, but it's way more deadly. That's the thing. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good point. I wonder how this will affect flu. Well, flu season's kind of over in our hemisphere, but maybe in the southern hemisphere, uh, that kind of thing. But I mean, the other thing, look at the other way, is that how many diseases are going to be made worse because of this kind of stuff, and
right.
that's kind of goes into the more chronic illnesses rather than the infectious diseases, but I mean infectious diseases as well. And so that brings us to sort of the first story that we have today, which is also about infectious disease.
Oh, smoothly done there, Flash. If
Who would have thought that this show would talk about diseases?
yeah, well, but the right diseases, not the one that we're all being overrun with.
Right, new
Yeah,
diseases you've never heard of,
as we said,
things
other
like
diseases are out there, listeners.
yeah, things like I can never pronounce this one.
Well, not things like that then.
Chikungunya virus.
You're just making shit up now,
Chikungunya
Flash.
virus. No, 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 no. It's related to Semliki forest virus.
Oh, yeah, now you're really digging yourself out of this hole, aren't you? Why don't you choose a disease you can actually pronounce to research, Flash?
Oh, hey, I don't choose them by the name. I choose them based on the interest, how interesting they are. And the interesting part about this story is
Okay,
that
hold
these
on, hold on, hold on. Give us the virus. Give us the disease names again, Flash, because I feel as if I've taken the piss a little bit and distracted the listenership, and the listenership are going to want to hear you say this again. So I'll be
Oh,
quiet. And
they'll get the names again.
okay,
Basically, we're talking about mosquito-borne diseases. So this is what this bit of research is about using a skin cream that's already used for several other applications in order to help reduce the amount or reduce the chances of getting an infection from a mosquito bite, a viral infection from a mosquito bite. So we
okay.
have this cream. There's this cream that you can get.
Yes.
Normally, you would get
You
it if
plugging this cream? Are we getting sponsored by this, and I'm not being told? Is this another one of those backhanded cash situations that I'm getting to see any cut?
no,
Okay,
not yet.
okay.
But I believe the brand name of the cream is Aldera. I'm just struggling to find the actual medical name. But here's the kicker: it's usually used to treat genital warts and
Well,
or certain types of skin cancer. So there you go.
so is it
Uh,
an antiviral cream then, or
Basically, yeah, because genital warts usually caused by a virus. Skin cancers can also be caused by viruses. And basically, what they looked at was whether this could sort of activate the immune system in skin cells after a mosquito bite. So a
oh, so it's
mosquito,
after, so it's not preventing the bite.
no, it's not preventing the bite; it's after. So and what the sort of one of the guys that conducted the research, it was done at the University of Leeds. So this Dr. Stephen Bryden, his quote on it is that by boosting the immune system and not targeting a specific virus, this strategy has the potential to be a silver bullet for a wide range of distinct mosquito-borne viral diseases. Um, and I want to point out that, like he says, boosting the immune system, but I've mentioned several times on the show that if you see products out there that are saying they can boost your immune system, it's bullshit, which it is. It's just poor language, but basically you're activating the immune system. And so how they did the research, this is kind of the interesting part too. So they looked at these different mosquito-borne diseases. So things like Zika and chikungunya virus.
If you just had a stroke, Flash, you okay? Should I call for medical assistance?
Dude, I don't know how to pronounce that. I don't know.
I think if we just breeze past it, Flash, nobody would have picked up that you don't know how to pronounce it. I think we just
Yeah.
move past it. It'll be fine.
They also looked at Semliki forest virus, which is
You want
related
to lick
to
my what?
Semliki forest virus,
I
which
thought
is
that's what you said.
related to chikungunya virus. And then they also looked at a genetically distinct virus called Bunia Buniamwera Buniamwera virus.
Are you trying to cast a spell? That's what it sounds like. You're just making random names.
I even practice these.
Oh, thank God you practiced, because I would hate to have heard this without you practicing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're all named after locations in
Okay.
Africa, on the African continent. Buniamwera is a town in western Uganda, and Chikungunya, I can't remember where it is from now, but it's part of a group of viruses called the Semliki forest viral complex. So there's this forest in Africa, obviously, where these viruses come from.
So,
Anyway,
so what I have learned from this coronavirus thing is we shouldn't be naming diseases after locations, as per
depends
WHO
who you talk.
guidelines.
Did the WHO say that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because Middle East respiratory syndrome. There's a lot that are named after locations.
Anyway.
I think my take on this, just very briefly, if we're going to tangent to this, is that because of the old blowhard in the U.S., he kind of ruined it, because it's like if his using the name of the location to name the virus was purely done out of spite
It
and
was, yeah.
xenophobia and all those other gross things that he has come to represent. So it's like now you can't do that, because if you do, then you're just siding with the dum dum over there, and sort of validating his position, which sucks, because one guy now has, like, lots of places have been named after, Marburg virus, the town I live in, and it's not necessarily a bad
No, that's
thing.
just
It's
what I call you, Flash.
yeah, that's what they call me over here, the Marburg virus. Anyway, that's just my thought on that. So anyway, so this is kind of interesting how they
Back to
did this.
mosquitoes. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
how they did this. So they had this idea that, this cream, which is antiviral in nature, we know it's safe for the use on the skin, so maybe we could use it for these mosquito-borne viruses. So for two of the viruses, Zika and chikungunya, they were tested on samples of human skin. Thank you. Thank you. I'm getting better. Um, so they actually took small skin samples from 16 volunteers and then, like, kept them in healthy condition in the laboratory, is how they phrase it. So I'm just imagining, skin slices in petri dishes or something like this.
Yum.
Yeah. And so then they cut each of the samples in half and allowed both halves to be infected by the virus.
Okay.
So for each 16 people, there was two halves, and then both get the virus, and then they apply the skin cream to one half after 1 hour. So give the virus, wait an hour, apply the skin cream to one half of the sample, and leave the other one without the treatment. And then 2 days later, they measure how well the virus had, replicated within the
Right, what the
skin.
viral load was. Yeah.
Yeah. So for Zika virus, they found that the chunk of flesh that didn't receive the treatment contained over 70 times more virus than
Okay.
the old skin chunk that had got the treatment. So there
Right.
was a noticeable difference. And then similar for chikungunya, the skin that got the cream the skin that didn't get the cream contained over 600 times more virus than the one that did. So both cases, the treated skin did not release infectious virus. So meaning it shouldn't, based on this, they're thinking that it should not have spread and caused disease in the body. So it limited it within the skin. Now,
Right. Yeah.
to me, that just says, well, it's not just the skin, like it's going into the blood. And once it's in the blood,
So
who knows?
presumably this and maybe we're going to get there. So presumably this cream, obviously, we said it's licensed for some types of cancers and genital warts, which is, usually has a viral component to it. So presumably this cream has some sort of antiviral effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's blocking the spread of the virus from the site of inoculation, effectively. So,
yeah,
mosquito bites, you apply the cream, and that potentially stops the spread of the virus from that point. Is that the...
Yeah, basically you're trying, the idea is that you're containing it at that site of infection, at that puncture wound, and then therefore it, like, the virus never has a chance to spread throughout the body and like gain hold in the body. I mean, this is like a similar, kind of similar, but like if you get infected with AIDS, like if you're working with AIDS in a lab and
So
you
you get HIV,
accidentally
yeah.
HIV, sorry. If you poke yourself with the needle that has it by accident, there's like a break glass and emergency cabinet, where you go there, rush there, and take a shit ton of antivirals
Antiviral,
right
right,
away,
yeah.
and then you can stop it from, hopefully you can stop it from replicating and like getting a hold in the body, so you can actually kill it before it, takes over the whole body, and then it's impossible to get rid of.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the same thing, is that but this cream is like activating the immune system, so it's giving the immune system a cause to be like, well, hey, come and get here. And this is what the cream does, is that it interacts with your immune system in order to, like I said, boost it, increase it, whatever, to fight
Yeah.
off, at that location. So it like calls the immune system to action at that location. So, and yeah, it's on the skin. So that was with the skin samples. So they're taking this, the fact that the ones with the cream had way less virus inside the skin cells and inside the skin sample, to mean that it won't spread. It shouldn't spread throughout the body. I'm just bringing up my own thought there of like, well, the virus, like the mosquito, doesn't just go into the skin, like it actually punctures into the bloodstream. So will it work just as well? But so then the other thing they did was they actually did tests in mice. So they took the 3 viruses that they tested in mice were Semlichiphorus, chikungunya, and Buniamwera. So they were looking, and so they did this to understand whether the cream could actually stop the viruses from infecting the body and causing damage in the rest of the body. So mice were infected with mosquito bites. 1 hour later, half the mice had the cream applied to the bites, so they put it on the area of the bite, and the other half didn't. 2 weeks after infection, the survival rate with the deadly Semlichiphorus virus was 0% for those that didn't get the cream, so they all died, compared to 65% survival for those that did get the cream. For chikungunya virus, which causes joint swelling and like arthritis in the joints, they looked at, so again, after 2 weeks, same procedure, they looked at the joints of the mice to see how many had become infected, the extent at which they had been infected in the joints. 70% of mice that did not receive the cream had virus in their ankle joints, compared to 30% that did. So again, it worked. And mice that were treated, the joints that were infected, had 90 times less virus than the ones that weren't. So even if they did have it in their, they got the cream and they still had virus in their joints,
But
it
it's
was
still
less than,
limited.
And then for the last one, the Bunyamwero virus, which is a little genetically different from the other ones they looked at. So again, just to try and say like, okay, we got this one family, like Zika, chikungunya, and Semliki are all related. Let's look at one that's a little distant, not related. So after infection, they found mice that didn't get the cream had up to 10,000 infectious virus particles per milliliter in their bloodstream, compared to less than 100 infectious virus particles per milliliter in those that got the treatment. So overall, it looks like it worked. The quote from one of the authors of the paper is, "It's too soon for us to recommend that people use this on their mosquito bites. naturally. Further testing and development is needed to ensure safety and effectiveness for this purpose. Yada yada yada. But it's a hopeful discovery that could potentially at least it might not cure, it might not totally prevent, but in areas where these viruses are prevalent, if you know that like, hey, I might have been bitten by a mosquito that has it, you just put the cream on and it helps your chances that anything's better than nothing. So
No, well, and so going back to the bit where you said about the virus, the mosquito is obviously trying to get to a blood meal. So, but I know obviously there are obviously some vector-borne diseases, mosquitoes or tick-borne diseases, where it is that direct ingestion of blood that's having an effect. But I also believe that some of them are caused by actually like the salival agents that the mosquitoes inject in to numb the
yeah.
area. So obviously, as the we don't feel the bite and then carry on feeding. So I wonder if that's where the cream, if in these cases the viruses are those type of viruses, then putting the cream on, you think would have an effect. But obviously, even it looks like once it gets into the body, this cream is having some sort of effect on lessening the viral load or the extent of the disease. So
Yeah. And I guess it's got to be that it's just like, and the interesting thing to me too is that they waited an hour after the mosquito bite or with the skin sample, the artificial, infection, which I would think would be a long time. I just imagine that like once a virus gets in the blood or whatever, that it's just like, the image in my head is that it's just like, like
well, I think you've got
flying
that.
around all to the body, but that's not really how it works.
No, and I think there's that threshold because in the UK we have a product. I think it's called First Defence. So if you have those early signs of a common cold coming on,
Hmm.
you have the sniffles and a bit of a scratchy throat. You can take this, and I think I've never used it. I believe it's a nasal spray, and it's effectively an an antiviral to try and catch it at that stage. So I presume there is a threshold by which if you can contain the virus to that point,
Hmm. Hmm.
then obviously the body can cope with it, or it doesn't show any clinical disease, and that's fine. And then so only over that threshold. So yeah, for me, it would be interesting what other how far a time interval, because obviously if you get bitten by a mosquito, unless you've got herpes and this cream on your bedside table, an hour probably isn't enough to go get a prescription and go to the pharmacy.
Yeah,
So it'd be
yeah,
interesting to know, oh, actually, you can wait 10 hours, 15 hours, 24
yeah,
hours and still apply the cream and still lessen the effect. And to what effect? That, it's not a cure, but certainly in areas where mosquito bites are prevalent,
yeah,
most repellents aren't 100%. So if
yeah.
you do get bitten,
And it could be, and it like they mentioned in this press release that I'm looking at here too, is that it's obviously for people with underlying conditions as well. You could have the cream on hand to sort of be like, hey, look, you're already at risk. And I'm imagining too that they would repurpose maybe it's not the exact formulation, but like using this like something similar to this cream or designing a specific cream for these mosquito borne infections, not just
right?
using
Yeah,
I don't know, could be. But I think the time window too, I'm just thinking about it, is that like, because like I said, my image of like virus, like it's getting in and it just like shoots all over your body and stuff, but it's actually the virus has to live in a cell. So it's going to infect the cells right around that the mosquito puncture first,
yeah.
right? Like, because it's got to get in. So it's going to go into the cells there. And then it takes time for it to replicate inside that cell and then kill that cell and then burst out and start to infect other cells. So that's really your window. And it would depend on how quickly the virus, replicates in a cell. And each virus has a different replication speed. There's different factors that would come into play in terms of how quickly a virus, can get into a cell, destroy that cell by replicating millions of times within it and then bursting out. So I guess that's kind of your window, is that if you can keep it within the original cells that it's infected and then sort of get the immune system ready to go so that anything that comes out of that area, they just pick it off so it doesn't infect the rest of it.
It's the
That's
sound effects of immunity working right there. No,
pew, pew,
no
pew,
expense
pew,
spared
pew.
on this machine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's the idea, which is cool.
Yeah, well, and anything with a lot of these diseases, as we said, to try and stop mosquito bites,
Yeah, good
it's a
luck.
it's a never-ending battle that we're never going to win. So having something like that in the army, it's an interesting one. And as we said, that the mechanism of action and the timing, duration of action will be an interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Does that then make it clinically useful?
Yeah. And the idea that it's like broad spectrum, because again, it's not like a specific antiviral targeted
Right.
for this disease. It's just, this is going to help your immune system wake up to the fact that there's something going on here and
Yeah.
bring all the antiviral components of the immune system. So you're really like, using your own body to get rid of it, but you're just giving it sort of more of a guideline, more of a guiding, hey, get over here, bring everybody, let's get this done. Pew 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 pew.
Just like that. So
Just
you can do the
just
pew
like
pew
that.
pews. It's just the pronouncing of the diseases that you struggle. Well, I'm gonna segue from viruses and transmissible disease to traffic jams, traffic congestion.
The virus of the planet.
Well, and people out there going, what, possibly the lamest segue. And trust me, listeners, if you listen to some of the early episodes, they've been a lot lamer, especially once I talk about why I've segued this way. So, traffic jams, traffic congestion, bane of most motorists' lives, to one way or another. We know a lot about how they form. It's been something that's been studied quite a lot. There's a lot of statistical modelling and computational modelling that gets into that. And obviously, we know a lot about how to, stop them. Get cars out of the way that are broken down, and don't rubberneck at accidents. But there's actually a new type of modelling that's been developed to look at this, and the modelling is actually looking at how traffic congestion spreads by treating it as a disease.
Which it is.
Exactly, especially in this time. So we're not talking about coronavirus. We're going to talk about another disease. We're talking about traffic congestion. So normally, a contagion model for a contagious disease is normally used to predict the spread of disease. So in this case, they've used it for traffic management. So it's a joint venture between the University of California, Berkeley, and Johns Hopkins. And basically, they started looking at how do we look at traffic management at the moment, and then how could they leverage their expertise in disease areas to see if that had an effect. So actually, it's interesting, 1933 is when the first description of traffic flow modelling was looked at. So about 25 years after the Model T. So hopefully somebody wasn't stuck in traffic for 25 years and then thought of this. A guy by the name, you're welcome. Hey, I'm here all day. I can't go anywhere else. I'm physically not allowed to go anywhere else. A guy called Bruce Greenshields was this pioneer in 1933. What he did is he took a movie camera, film camcorder, cine camera, whatever the equivalent was in 33. Basically took time-lapse photography, so consecutive pics at constant intervals, basically to look at the flow of traffic. And basically, we've then moved on from there. So nowadays, the most advanced type of modeling that we use actually uses anonymous location data from mobile phones and things. And then they run simulation models on that. And that's basically how it works. So somewhere in the cloud or in a data processing center, there's simulation modeling that goes on to look at how that moves. But actually, the computer power needed to do a lot of those modeling makes it really useless for real-time use. So, a lot of people use Apple Maps or Google Maps or Waze for their traffic directions, and that gives good real-time data based on users' data, and they use simplified algorithms to do that. Behind that, to predict that, there's huge supercomputers. So the hope of using this contagion model is to try and simplify that a little bit. So high level, the way the contagion model works is it works on an SIR approach. So susceptible, infected, and recovered model approach. So they studied this several cities: Sydney, Melbourne, New York City, Chicago, Montreal, and Paris. And basically, if you take that SIR modeling, if you're an epidemiologist, so if you're studying disease, then you divide your population that you're looking at into three distinct areas. So you just would split them normally, if you're looking at disease, into a population that's susceptible. So coronavirus, global. the subsection that's then infected, and then the section that's then recovered.
Right.
So what these, and this has been published in Nature Communications this month, is they split the population into three using the SI model, but they split it into free-flowing traffic or free-flowing roads, congested links or roads, and then what they deemed is recovered. So roads that or links, and I use links because in their paper they use the term links. So links is roads and junctions and things, and then recovered. So obviously, if you recover, if there's been a traffic jam, it's recovering. It's not moving as quickly as it could, but it is moving.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, using that model, they can create what they call their reproductive number. So in epidemiology for disease, then it's how quickly an infection spreads. So in this case, it's how quickly congestion spreads. And what they've shown is actually they can use it to. They can't use it like you would as part of your Apple map. So you wouldn't. Oh, I'm going from A to B. You look and it goes. Oh well, actually, you don't take route 1 to A to B because that's screwed. Take route 2 or 3. It can't be used that way. What it can do is it can help predict a lot, and it can model the percentage of links or roads that would be affected. So ultimately, the idea of this is for planning purposes. So it should be able to cut down
for like city planners,
and also then for other modelling. So maybe it's a quicker way of doing some quick and dirty modelling. And I've used the term quick and dirty. They don't use that. Somebody's invested a lot of time and effort into this, and I've just distilled it down into one page of notes and called it quick and dirty. So my apologies. But could you? And we talked about a threshold earlier with your earlier story about a threshold of disease. Can you keep the threshold of traffic congestion to a level where it's manageable? So traffic still moves. It doesn't. The trouble with traffic congestion is it breeds more congestion because people get infuriated and they have an accident and that causes more congestion. So can you keep it below a threshold whereby at this point it's not having a negligible effect on other roads or links around? And then the idea is that you could then actually use it to predict where bottlenecks occur, then remove those bottlenecks, obviously, for planning, but then also maybe change signalling times on road junctions, or maybe change a stop sign into a roundabout or into a traffic light junction. But an interesting take on, and a tentative link here of disease, but trying to take something that's quite actually well understood. We actually know high level how diseases spread, not talking about how it actually affects, but how it spreads based on this SIR model. We've known that for a long time. So now can we apply that model to other uses to give us, a better understanding of things? And so this for me was just an interesting one when I saw it of, when I was trying to do some research, looking for a story, unrelated to coronavirus.
And it's hard to find these days.
It is, yeah. I had to do quite a lot of digging, but I thought this was an interesting one. And I imagine a lot of the epidemiologists involved in this are probably working on other stuff right now.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see going forward if people like Apple and Google and whatever start building some of this into their background, or whether it is just for city planners. But one that I just thought was interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great example too of like taking an idea from one area and putting it in another one, right? Like it's same to some extent with the last one we talked about too, repurposing a drug for one thing to another thing.
Right, yeah.
I mean, and we've talked about this how many times on this show? Countless. That's where most of the great research comes from, is this idea of taking things from other fields and putting them into the other. And this has been our case for why we need basic research. We've been making that case since early April 2017, as it turns out.
Well, if only people would listen to us earlier, Flash.
Right. If only people would listen to us at all.
Well, yeah, that would, yeah, you're right. I've set the bar high there, and just listen to us once, and hopefully it'll spread like a virus. So
yeah, we could model how the podcast is spreading.
Yeah, well, it seems like most people out there have been vaccinated against this podcast based on our listenership. But,
or the listeners are quarantining themselves because they're not passing it on. Yeah, that's a shot at you, listeners. Pass it on.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to come and cough all over you.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I mean, and it makes some sense that if you can, you know, you want to kind of keep it moving, keep the traffic moving, and maybe it's not perfect, but it would prevent it from getting worse. And so that idea of sort of like that's like the idea of transmission in a disease. So it's like, yeah, okay, if you can slow down, like that's what we're all doing right now is trying to slow down the propagation of this disease. And
Yeah,
if you could slow down the propagation of a traffic jam, then yeah, overall people are going to be happier.
yeah,
But maybe we just realize after this whole thing that everyone can work from home and there's only a section of the public that needs to work not at home and they deserve to be paid more. That's something we
yeah,
could learn too. They deserve to be paid way more and have more better benefits. But yeah, so we won't need traffic jams and we won't have traffic jams and things like this. But no, it's interesting. I would be curious, like you said at the end there too, to see how it like where it actually gets applied. If it's going to be sort of like on a commercial end of like a Waze or Google Maps or something like that, if there's some kind of application there, or if it's purely going to be like these are the roads that we're thinking of building. And if we model some scenarios of traffic on there using this
yeah.
model where it work or similar areas, stuff like that. I just want to make sure that the listeners know that when he says junction, he means intersection. And when he says roundabout, he means a traffic circle. Signals, traffic lights. Just a little
Thanks for the
translation there for the rest of us that speak English.
well, no, and thanks for the translation because yeah, whenever I drive in the US, I get totally freaked out by four-way stops. That is just a disaster waiting to happen.
Oh, they're the worst. They're the
Yeah,
worst. We have them in Canada too.
stick a roundabout there or traffic circle. You know, if you're that way, but a roundabout's just so much easier.
Yeah, yeah. We have four-way stops in Canada too, and it's the absolute worst. It makes no sense, and yeah, yeah. I'm with
Well,
you on that one.
you're also relying on people being decent human beings. Of well, I got here first, so I go next. And I think what we've learned through this pandemic is most people are selfish out there, so we can't rely on other people.
See, in Canada, it's the opposite problem. You get
Oh,
you
people are
get
too nice.
yeah, you get these like people arriving at the same time, and then everyone's in their car going, pointing, being like, "You go first, you go first," and the other person's going, "No, you go, no, you go," and then both start to creep out because they're like, "Well, I guess I'm gonna go because he's not going," and then you get the like, yeah, both people, not wanting to go, or you get the situation where it's like, I'm pulling up to the four-way stop, clearly slowing down because I'm going to stop. I'm not blowing through the intersection. I'm slowing down, but the person that could have made his turn or gone through waits till I've come to a complete stop and then goes. And then so it's just like, it just slows everything down. And yeah, like in Canada, it's like I said, it's the opposite. It's people are too nice. We're
Well, that's Canada in a nutshell for you.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
God, I miss it. All right. What do we have next?
It's you next, I believe, and a great example that you've forgotten what you're talking about, as it's going to be talking about memory.
Right. My memory
So
story.
you planted that as a little segue there, didn't you? Oh, what was next? I can't remember. Oh wait, it's about memory.
Oh, we'll never know. We'll never know the truth, will we? Yeah. No, I found this one, and memory stuff is always really interesting. We've talked about some memory stuff before, and it's to me the idea of how they can link specific areas of the brain to memory is fascinating. Like there's lots of psychology studies where it's like false memories, how you can sort of implant an idea in somebody's head and they feel like they remember it, or there's witness testimony and stuff. So we kind of have these things that are outside of neuroscience, but it's still memory, like but this story is really, it's the neuroscience of memory. So this is the really fascinating stuff for me. It's like what cells are doing what, and how are memories stored and things like this, because that to me just seems like some kind of metaphysical thing that we just don't understand
It's
still.
magic.
Yeah,
it's magic.
right.
Yeah,
It's got to be. So this story is about finding a sort of a new kind of memory. So for a while, we've known that Memories are stored in the hippocampus, which is, oh God, if my lovely wife Teresa hears me and I get this wrong, we're gonna be social distanced for a while. I think the hippocampus is that it's located at the no, that's the cerebellum is below. Anyway, it's in your brain.
Yeah.
It's a part of your brain.
So okay, it's part of the brain. Yeah, let's move on from that, Flash. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Um, and so there's a type of cells there that they're called place cells, and they store specific location memories. So this is the you may have heard of this these studies where they get a rat or a mouse or something to run through a maze, and they're recording brain activity as they're learning the maze, and so they can see specific areas of the brain of the hippocampus light up. These place cells, they light up as the animal is in parts of the maze, and every time it goes to that part of the maze, those cells light up, indicating that it's like those cells are activated based on the memory of that specific location. And then even more interesting is then at night when the animal is sleeping, they'll see those same areas lighting up in the same sequence. So this is how they got the idea that when you're sleeping, you're dreaming about things that you had learned, and
And that's forming.
it's a consolidation,
Right.
right? So we know that we have these specific location cells, but what they wanted to understand is if there's like a more sort of abstract type of memory that's not necessarily tied so much to location, but more to activity. So they use this in this paper and in the press stuff that comes with it. They talk about they use the example of a restaurant. So you go into a restaurant, your place cells would be if you had been in that restaurant before, then those would light up because they recognize that specific
Yeah.
place. But potentially there's another section of memory that is activating just because of the activity that you're doing. So ordering an appetizer, or looking at a menu, or ordering and eating dessert, things like this. So they're tied to sort of the activity and not the place. So these would, in theory, light up in every restaurant that you went to because they're associated with that other thing.
Yeah, in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of the idea. So in order to test it, they looked at measuring the activity of neurons in this what's called the CA1 region of the mouse hippocampus as mice repeatedly ran a 4-lap maze. And at the end of every 4 laps, they were given a treat, a reward. So, as they expected, they found that the place cells lit up when the mice reached certain points in the maze. So they had these memories of specific locations within the maze. But they also found that there was another set of cells that were activated during one of the 4 laps, but not the others. So about 30% of the neurons in this CA1 region appeared to be involved in creating this event memory. They're calling it the event code of the memory. So yeah, what they believe they were seeing is that they were witnessing there was the cells in the hippocampus that were, you know, activating to space and location, but also another group that were activating or concerned with this discrete chunk of experience. So for example, lap 1, lap 2, lap 3, and there would be these different cells that would go for that sort of event rather than the specific
Right.
location. So then to kind of tease it out even further, they then trained the mice to run a square maze, a square shaped maze on day 1, and then a circular maze on day 2. Um, 4 laps every time, again, with getting a treat after the fourth lap. And so here they found that the place cells, so the ones that are memorizing location, specific location, changed in accordance with either the square or the circle maze. So those were still working in the same way. There's cells that were
Yeah.
specifically getting the memory of, oh, this is the circle maze. Oh, this is the square maze. And they found that the same sets of lap specific cells were activated during each of the 4 laps, regardless of the shape of the track. So again, they had a group of cells that were like, hey, this is me doing lap 1. This is what happens when I do lap 1. This is what happens lap 2, 3, 4 in anticipation of the
Right.
reward, right? Um, and on top of that, they found that the lap encoding cells, so the sort of event encoding cells, the activity also remained consistent if the laps were randomly shortened or lengthened. So even if the lap
Okay.
length was longer, they still had the one, this is lap 1, this is lap 2, this is,
Lap two. Right.
so they still had that ability to get that memory. Um, and in the new spatial, so yeah, and they also activated the same way in the new spatial location. So circle versus square. They maintain the cells maintain their coding for lap number. So yeah, the cells that were associated with lap 1 in the square maze were the same ones that were associated in the circle maze. So they weren't tied to location. So it was totally a different set of cells that was looking at this different sort of memory, this different sort of event, rather than the location. Um, and then finally, they used a technique called optogenetics, which we may have talked about on this paper, but basically, or on this podcast, basically what you can do is you can put a special virus, basically that you've engineered, into certain cells of the brain, and then by shining a UV light on it, it activates that virus, and the virus then deactivates neurotransmitters in that region of the brain. So basically, you can shut off an area of the brain. And when they did this, so they inhibited the sensory input from a part of the brain called the medial entorhinal cortex, or the MEC, the lap encoding memories didn't occur. So they were able to turn off that lap encoding memory. So kind of giving a better idea of where spatially this is going on in the brain.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So their conclusion is that they found like 2 mutually and independently manipulatable codes for memory, the sort of place memory and the event memory. Um, One is dealing with continuous changes to location, time, and sensory input, while the other organizes an overall experience into smaller chunks that fit into known categories. So going back to the restaurant example, this would be like your appetizer, entree, dessert category. Different sort of memory cells encoding for these different experiences, these different events, kind of thing. So, according to Susumu Tongawa, a professor of biology at MIT, who conducted the study, his quote is, "We believe that both types of hippocampal codes are useful and both are important. If we want to remember all the details of what happened in a specific experience, moment to moment changes that occurred, then the continuous monitoring is effective. But on the other hand, when we have a longer experience, if you put it into chunks and remember the abstract order of the abstract chunks, that's more effective than monitoring this long process of continuous changes." So that's kind of the more
So
scientific
what?
way of explaining it all. And then finally, they think that this might also be involved in a process called transfer learning, which I imagine is a something that they study in psychology, and a way in which people learn. And basically, this is a type of learning that allows you to take knowledge that you've learned somewhere else and have it to help you interpret new experiences or learn new things.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask. What do they see the knock-on effect of this learning be?
Yeah. And that's, and that makes sense. Yeah. And also links to what we were talking about, taking how you can take things from one area and apply them to another. So this might be directly, how the brain does that in terms of learning new things.
It always amazes me when, and I know we've talked about this one, obviously, your Teresa works and said just how they work through these. To me, the brain is, and we joke that it's just a box of magic. God knows how it all works up
Yeah.
there, and how they track through things like this is just incredible to me.
Well, and that's the thing, like when you think about kind of what I was trying to get at when I was rambling on at the beginning of the story of like how fascinating this is of like how is a memory stored? Like what is that data in terms of, like in a computer, it's ones and zeros, it's bits and bytes, binary code. But what is it in the brain? Like what, and basically we don't really know what it is yet, like what that hard imprint is. But this just shows actually how kind of crude, maybe crude's the wrong word, but simple the methods we have for looking at the brain are, where basically we're looking at this region turns on, this one doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's clever. I find the experiments in this area to be very cleverly designed, because if you know that, okay, we can look for regions of the brain that are lighting up or not, how do we design an experiment that would tease out these two
Yeah.
areas of memory? And that's, when you think of it, the maze running thing that we just described, it sounds very simple. It's a very simple, sort of elegant, but elegant design of, okay, well, we can, by changing the type of maze, or by giving them this maze that they have to run, we can isolate the place cells. But then by having this 4-lap discrete system where they have to know that they get a treat after 4 laps, not just randomly, then
Yeah.
it gives you this.
Regardless of the shape of that lap
Yeah,
or
exactly.
length of that. Yeah.
Then it gives you this, you can look for what areas might be lighting up in accordance only with that. So kudos to the neuroscientists. And I think like this is, I talk about this a lot with Teresa, because she does this behavioral neuroscience work. And there's always this, with any scientific field, there's always a tendency to want to use the fancy techniques, like we mentioned, this optogenetics thing, which is really cool and it's useful for doing certain things. But there's always this, oh, what do we use brain imaging or brain scans, or, all these crazy things to see what's going on, when really you need this sort of, you can take all the pictures of the brain you want, but if it's not correlated to something that's actually going on, some behavior that the animal, or or whatever is doing, then really what is it telling you? So you really need these like well designed, behavioral experiments that allow you to then say, okay, this is what they're doing, what's happening in the brain, how can we tease
Right.
out
Yeah.
that noise, because the brain is just flurry of activity all the time. So I really like that one, and I really like the idea of what is memory and where is it stored and how is it stored, and so that's me tipping my hat to the neuroscientists, the eggheads in the lab. Keep doing what you're doing. I will remember you.
This time, hopefully. Well, and interesting. So we touch on brain scans and things there, which takes me into my next, and this is only a short feature for today. So, dogs' noses.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of them.
Yeah. It's up there in terms of the life of Brian, with otter snouts and badger ears for snacks in some parts of the country. But yeah, dogs' noses. By all accounts, and I didn't realize this, there's been a whole field of research for quite a while to try and work out why is a dog's nose wet and cold. So it turns out it's not just for sniffing smells. So for a long time, it's just been thought that a dog's nose is wet because it helps capture aroma particles, and then that helps them sniff things out. And as we all know, they have a much better sense of smell than humans do. But actually, there's been some work done that shows that actually it's not just smells that they sense. They can also sense heat through their nose. So this is a collaboration between. For your butt. Well, you're pretty hot stuff, Flash. So why wouldn't they? So this is a collaboration between Lund University in Sweden and Itavos Lorand University in Hungary.
Listen to that pronunciation. Oh, good.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, Flash. When you were screwing up your pronunciations earlier, I made sure that I spelled those out phonetically so I could get it right. So the tip of the dog's nose is called the rhinarium.
Makes sense.
And it's filled with lots and lots of nerves. Again, makes sense. But actually, what they discovered is actually they can sense heat, and actually from a distance. And actually, the nearest thing it's akin to would be like thermoreceptors in our skin, human skin. Obviously, you hold your hand to a fire and you feel the warmth. Effectively, a dog's nose can do that for them.
Well, I mean, technically, my nose can do that too.
Well, if I hold you close enough to it, yeah. So the two universities conducted a series of experiments to see if the dogs could detect heat. And they think that actually, evolutionary-wise, this probably came from the fact of them being part of, obviously, being able to sense and smell prey, but also once they got up close, using heat to sense where that prey was. So what they did is they took 3 dogs, Kevin, Delphi, and Charlie were the 3 dogs' names. And actually, one of the dogs was the dog of the lead researcher. And they picked out, what they did is they trained these dogs to start with to pick out objects that were around about 12 degrees Celsius hotter than the room temperature. So they got them used to, okay, this is hot and you can sense this. Then what they did is they moved the objects around, moved them away, but then they also covered them. So there was no, optically they couldn't sense where they were, and they moved them around.
Visual,
and what they discovered is the dogs could still sense them.
I'm assuming they eliminated scent too.
Well, I think part of the covering was also to deaden the scent. And then what they did is, so that was done at the Swedish part of the university. The Hungarian part actually then scanned 3 dogs to try and highlight the part of the brain connected with the nose, which is in dogs actually really well known because it's sense smell. But actually what they found was actually that part of the brain also lit up when the dogs were exposed to a warm object. So by all accounts, this isn't unique just to dogs. Some types of snakes and beetles and vampire bats use heat detection in a similar way to find prey or to be aware of predators potentially. But actually, as with all good science, it's brilliant you've done the science. What the hell is the use of it? Well, actually, what they're saying is there are some dog breeds that are bred now not to have cold, wet noses because owners don't like it when they come to sniff their butt or whatever. But actually, for certain types of breeds, this would be really important. Obviously, if you're using dogs for search and rescue and things, then having a dog that has a cold, wet nose, this could be useful. So actually, the next stage of this is looking at, could you, as well as training search and rescue dogs just to sense smell and track on smell, could you also train
to have better heat noses?
Exactly. Could you also train dogs to have better heat-seeking noses?
Well, I'm not even talking about train. I'm talking about like manipulate, either breed it or get in there with some CRISPR.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what they're saying. So actually, then you would select breeds for search and rescue that have cold, wet noses, but also within that subset of breeding, you would select breeding for that trait.
Yeah.
So you actively promote that trait of having a cold, wet nose. So just as I said, a little small one, but an interesting one. I thought of when I kept seeing all these pictures of dogs' noses like shoved up at the camera. I was like, what on earth is this article trying to get me to read? And there you go. So heat-seeking beagle hounds. That's what we need.
Yeah. So they did the brain scans to show the brain activity was lighting up in the same region when they were exposed to the heat. Right.
So it's the same region. If you give them a smell, then that region of the brain heats up. So they know that region of the brain is linked to
the nose,
the nasal nerves. Yeah, the nose.
Yeah.
And then when they put a heat object, so it's not long range. So they think around about 1.5 2 meters is probably the limit of detection.
Yeah.
So it's not massive, but what they're potentially saying is actually like for the search and rescue dogs, avalanche detection, avalanche detection, dogs that are avalanche deployed rescue. In avalanche regions, because by all accounts, the colder it is, the smell can be deadened down quite a lot. So actually, then by using just the heat, that might.
I could see in like landslides, earthquakes. That's what I was thinking. All that kind of stuff too. I was gonna say they could. I wonder if you looked at, sort of heat receptor cells that we've identified in these other animals, like you said, vampire bats, snakes, and stuff like that, and did like a cell comparison,
to see if it's the same,
Right.
because that would be the other line of evidence that would show that this really is a heat detection thing. If there's this sort of similar, you know, you look at the cells under the microscope and they're designed to do different things, right? So the smell cells have a different shape and different function and all that. Same with these
Right.
heat
Yeah.
ones. So I wonder if you did like a comparison of those across the animal kingdom, how similar they would be, or if we would find that they're using different, cell designs to do this. Like evolution has made this ability in different ways. That would be interesting. And relatives of the dog, like do the how strong is it in wolves? Um,
Well, so that's an interesting one. So one of the things that they speculate at the end of this paper, so it's published in Nature last month, is actually what they've started to look at, and they haven't published on this yet. They just started to look at it. Is actually in regions where there are a lot of wild dogs,
mm,
a lot of the prey animals, so sheep and mountain goats, whatever, actually have a lot of insulation, probably more insulation than they would need for that region typically. So part of the speculation is, have they got that insulation to try and keep their heat in, to try and
mm,
limit the heat source that then the wild canids
yeah.
can't detect?
Or even like snakes or anything else that would be
Yeah,
using that to. Yeah, that's
yeah,
interesting to think of it from the prey side, what
yeah.
adaptation might be to counter that.
To
Because I was
yeah,
thinking of like, like a dog or a wolf or wolves not so much because they're really hunting, but like you could see like a dog or an early ancestor of a dog that's like rooting around in the ground for little weasels or something like that. And it's like, so you can't
yeah.
really see anything, you're in the dirt, so maybe smell isn't really good there, but you can get
Not the key thing. Yeah,
heat as it's like, am I close to the burrow, am I not, that kind of thing.
yeah.
Interesting.
Well, and also there's obviously a lot of use now for dogs for like medical diagnostics. So epilepsy detection dogs and diabetes
Cancer
dogs. I know
sniffing
that can
dogs.
sense and cancer sniffing dogs. So there's been a chain of thought. I know with the cancer dogs there is, and I've not looked at the others, but I know for cancer dogs there is a specific chemical chain that they think these dogs are smelling, and that's what they are training them on.
Hmm.
But I know in some cases they haven't identified what it is the dog actually can smell and detect. So I wonder, and this isn't in the paper, this is me just making shit up now. I wonder if that's another element we could look at, though. Fever detection dogs, or those small changes in how sensitive is that nose?
Yeah. But see, that's what I don't get, like with the dogs for diagnostics. And obviously, there's a reason to do it if people are doing it. But I'm always just like, couldn't we build our own sensor that would be more
Well, they have done it for
sensitive?
cancer, haven't they? There's a breathalyzer that basically can detect like 20 different cancers.
Yeah,
Still in the lab.
yeah.
It's not in commercial use yet, but so yeah, they're always looking down. But yeah, the dog's nose is just way more sensitive.
There's an interesting one too. Just a total different tangent that I just thought of is, and maybe we can talk about this on another episode. But looking at the eye and eye movement, subtle eye movement can diagnose stroke, bunch of other different neural psychological disorders to like a really high precision. And so they even they're starting with these little cameras or whatever that will be in an ambulance. So someone that's being taken to the hospital, they can like take a screen thing of their eye and be like, oh yeah, this person's having a stroke, when there would be no other,
Hmm.
you know. So maybe it's something like that, is that you look at the dog nose and say, how can we use this design to make our own thing? I don't know.
Yeah, but yeah, one to watch. But I thought it was just it made me smile when I read it, and anything that makes me smile at the moment when I read it is a good thing. So yeah, there you go. Flash, you're going to wrap up with the last story today, which I think is an important one.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, despite the advice of places like the American Psychological Association and other, nerds in the lab telling us that we shouldn't um, use alcohol, well, and other substances, but alcohol to help us get through the stress of isolation and whatnot. I know that that's what people are doing, and it's okay. I'm not here to.
You're not out there going through people's trash cans, are you? Like, oh, they've been drinking quite a lot this week.
No.
Going through the recycling bins.
I just know the types of people that I hang out with and the type of person that I am. And I'm assuming that everyone is like that.
It's a big assumption, but in this case, one that on my limited experience is pretty spot on.
Yeah. So we're not here to judge and say,
That's good. Let's make that clear.
We're not here to judge.
In fact, we would actively encourage listening with a beverage of an alcoholic nature in hand, as we often so record.
Yeah,
with
I
such
was
a
just going to say that's often how we're doing this. So, hey, you should too. But no, so this was a study about what they termed a well-known hangover drug. And I had never heard of this hangover drug. And as someone that's experienced many the hangover, I thought I would be the guy to know. So there's this compound called, wait for this pronunciation.
Oh, here we go.
Dihydromyristin. We're just going to go with DHM. It's an over-the-counter herbal remedy, or herbal, and it soothes pounding alcohol-related headaches. So this thing has been known in Southeast Asia. This compound has been known in Southeast Asia for over 500 years. It's been used to treat liver ailments. It's derived from the fruit from the Japanese raisin tree, known as Hovina dulcis. It's found in Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, and now it's commercially grown. But no one really knew how it worked, like what it was actually doing. So that was sort of the goal of this research. It's like, we know that it works for alcohol-related headaches, hangovers, and that people have been using it for 500 years, but we didn't really know how it works. And this is going to be my moment to talk about herbal remedies and how, because in the past I've shit on them a lot, as I think you should, because most of them don't get this kind of treatment where people say, oh, let's actually try and see how it works. They found, what they already knew was that it helps metabolize alcohol faster. And what they witnessed was that, or what they report, sorry, excuse me, is that it activates a cascade of mechanisms.
Coronavirus takes another victim.
Yeah, you guys will get to hear. I'll podcast my journey through coronavirus. Activates a cascade of mechanisms that erase alcohol from the body very, very quickly. That's according to one of the study authors. So there's this cascade of metabolic changes that don't just help with headaches, but they found that it might also help with the liver. So their idea is that it could be useful as a dietary supplement that deals not just with the immediate negative consequences of alcohol, but also some of the long-term effects as well. And this is mainly cirrhosis of the liver. So alcohol-related liver disease. The liver is where alcohol is processed. So this is not surprising. But alcohol-related liver disease, I think, counts for like half of all cases of cirrhosis of the liver in the U.S. You can look at all the stats of the bad things that alcohol does to your body. So to get an idea of what might be happening here, they used mice. So this is also a caveat of it's a herbal remedy, which I've shit on in the past, and we need to understand these things better rather than just taking them because they're natural and people have been doing it for hundreds of years. Like, that's not a good enough reason. And we'll just say that this is a mouse study, so caveats there as well. We don't know, it's not always translatable mice to humans. But what they did was they fed 36 mice a daily diet of alcohol for 2 months, and
sign me up for that study.
Yeah, exactly. And gradually increasing the doses so that 30% of their total food intake, for an average of 39.4 grams per kilogram of ethanol per day per mouse. So getting up there in terms of how much how much booze these mice are drinking. Um, and then they assessed the livers for injury and markers of stress. So that was from the press release. So I had to go into the actual paper to get a better idea of the design, because I was like, did they give all of them what were the controls? And basically they did have controls where it's like you either got um, water and no alcohol. So sort of just a normal mouse. You either got, and then one was alcohol and a saline injection. And then the other group was alcohol and 5 milligram dose or something like that of this DHM, and then alcohol and a 10 milligram dose of the DHM, so a higher dose. And they were getting daily doses of this DHM chemical compound. And so what they found was that the DHM triggered the liver to produce more ethanol, what they called ethanol gobbling enzymes, including alcohol dehydrogenase, and acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, ALDH. There was boosted efficiency of both of those dehydrogenases, which enabled the enzymes to convert ethanol into simpler forms that the body can get rid of easier. There was reduced fat accumulation in liver tissue, heavy doses of alcohol. This is important because heavy doses of alcohol affect the liver's metabolism by an accumulation of fat, and then there's increased stress, which eventually progresses to liver disease. And then they also found reduced inflammatory cells, the cytokines, in the livers. So excessive alcohol can lead to the release of these cytokines in the liver, which again leads to cell damage and then cirrhosis, and even in some damage in other organs associated with it. So yeah, it's early days, but the idea is that this could be when taken, sort of daily as a like I said, a diet supplement or something like this, it's basically just going to help your liver process alcohol, cope with the beating that you're putting on your liver. And so of course I'm reading this and being like, oh yeah, this is just going to be alcoholics and everyone else, all the binge drinkers and everything out there, just be great, sign me up. I don't want to change my lifestyle. Forget that. Give me the pill that
exactly. Just take a pill.
Give me the pill that just eliminates the negative effects from my lifestyle. But obviously that's not what they want out of this research. It would be more for, here's what they said from the press release: binge drinkers could use DHM for its liver protection properties, extending the function of the organ long enough for the person to get help and stop their bad drinking habit.
Okay.
Right. So that's going to happen.
Well, yeah. So the question I was going to ask is, and you've answered it there, is this something you wake up in the morning, oh God, I feel so rough, what a night, and you take this? But no, it sounds like something that you proactively are taking.
Yeah. Well, that's for these potential long-term effects. And again, they just did it in mice, and only 36 mice, so it's not even really that big of a sample size.
Right.
And that's 36 mice across all the control groups. So each group is actually quite smaller. But for the what you'd call the acute effects, like the hangover, people have been taking this for a while, and it's, like I said, an over-the-counter herbal remedy. So people have known about it, and I guess we know that it has some it activates the enzymes in the liver that reduce
right alcohol. And then that was
so
going to be the second discussion or question was, so it's activating, so it's not a pro-drug in that it's getting metabolized itself into the drug. So what I was thinking of, like the Japanese, for instance, don't have the ability to make alcohol dehydrogenase, which is why they process alcohol in a different way, in a slower way. So actually, when you see a lot of Japanese people drink, they go red very quickly because they can't process alcohol as quickly because they don't have. So is this you said this drug works on multiple pathways. So, does this drug would that work? Do we think in that population?
I don't know.
That's the first question, and then the second, presumably, if they cannot create alcohol dehydrogenase, this drug isn't going to help them. So, does this drug then get metabolized into alcohol dehydrogenase to help them?
Yeah.
I'm going to guess not.
I don't think so. Yeah, and it sounds like some of it, like it's still, like I said, early days with this kind of thing. So here's a quote from one of the study co-authors. We know DHM. We know what DHM is doing and how it's doing it mechanically, activating a cascade of energy regulating mechanisms that speed metabolism of ethanol and its byproducts.
Okay. So it sounds like it's kickstarting the liver to, hey, go deal with this.
Yeah.
Well, I know I watched a documentary years ago now, and it was like the secrets behind the Iron Curtain or something. So there were several parts to it, and it was talking about research that went on in the Soviet Union, and part of it, I think we touched on before, was around bacteriophage, so the organisms that actually infect bacteria with viruses, and they use that in genetic engineering stuff now, and they're using that potentially as a replacement for some types of antibiotics. Anyway, side note, the other part of the documentary was had the KGB actually discovered a hangover preventing drug to allow their spies to go out and basically mingle and get drunk with, Americans and diplomats at high level, but get really drunk, but then take this drug so that they don't have the hangover, and therefore they can keep on drinking, and get through it. And it was sort of debunked as no, if Russia had this, they certainly would have made it available because it would be $1 billion selling drug.
Yeah.
Overnight.
Yeah, and so it sounds like this is like it's not prophylactic in the sense that you take it before you go out drinking, and then you're not gonna. It sounds like it's like you've drank, you're dealing with a hangover, you take this, and it can help lessen the effect. It'd be like taking the aspirin the next morning or something like that. Because they mentioned something here in this paper too about how it's like the amount of time that it takes your body to metabolize alcohol. Like it's like one hour per drink. So if you've gone out and had all these drinks, it's going to take hours for that to metabolize, and therefore all of these, metabolites, all of the things that alcohol is being broken down into, and the chemicals or the enzymes that do that breaking down are floating around your body for hours and hours and hours, and that's what's causing this hangover. So if you have a this drug that sort of speeds up the liver of like getting rid of all of this stuff, then it's gonna reduce that hangover, and then in turn there's long-term effects to that are good for your liver, which just makes sense because you're getting rid of all this, all of this stuff. It's interesting. It's one of those things that, obviously the research community, the medical community is going to do it as like, no, this would be to help people so that like, as they're getting into treatment for alcoholism, they're not going to die on the way. Whereas
not to keep
the rest of the population views this as, oh, hey, I can keep drinking. This is going to be great for my hangover when I'm.
It's the drinker's version of Viagra.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I remember years ago reading in one of the,
I wonder where that line was going from. I remember years ago taking Viagra, and I still have the erection now.
Yeah, you think I should see a doctor about that? No, it was I can't remember, Scientific American or one of these magazines, but they were talking about things like this, the hangover cure, the miracle thing, and there was I don't know if they were working on it or it was like one of these thought experiment things where they're like, what if you had a drug that you could drink and get drunk and be in that inebriated state, whatever, and then pop this pill that would clean up all of that stuff out of your body within a matter of, X amount of time, and then you're just fine. You're like sober again. Right. Or vice versa, you have a pill that very specifically induces the effects of inebriation, So it's like a simulated drunk. You're still drunk, but it's not from alcohol, but it's the exact same feeling. But you take this and then it wears off in like 3 hours as opposed to 24 hours that it takes to deal with a binge, you know? And it's like, would that be the same? Like, would people, if you gave people the two options, would they do that? Or would they continue with drinking? And the idea is like, obviously, there's a cultural factor that goes into drinking behavior and the social factor of, you know, being at a party and consuming the beer and doing this stuff rather than like you show up at the party, pop the pill, you're drunk instantly, and then 4 hours later you're like, well, we're off, I can
Yeah,
drive home now or whatever, you know. Like that to me seems weird. But then when I think about that, I'm like, it's equally weird that I would be like, no, I would prefer to drink copious amounts of beer over over an evening to achieve the same effect of getting drunk or whatever, you know, the feelings that I'm getting, and then deal with it. Like, what's weirder?
yeah. It's well, and I always remember when I was doing sort of A levels and things, people saying then that effectively, you know, alcohol wouldn't get licensed if it was a drug newly discovered and coming to the market. It wouldn't get a license for sale now because it is so dangerous and so. But it's just worked, you know, because it's part of our culture and it, you know, it's just routine. Oh yeah, of course you'd go out and incapacitate yourself through drink on a regular basis. That in a sense, when we were talking about the Russian bits and popping a pill and stuff, it made me think. So a friend sent me this week. I'm a James Bond fan, and a friend had kindly given me a James Bond box set, and then he also sent me a poster that was made from a publication that was in the British Medical Journal. I just looked it up now. What he sent me, it doesn't have the date of the publication on there, but basically it was the title was basically, does James Bond like his martini shaken and not stirred? Because that's the only way he can hold it, because he's basically got a cerebellar tremor through all the alcohol he's drunk over the years. So then it's a load of Bond facts of actually Bond has only had 12 and a half alcohol-free days for the 87 and a half days he's been able to drink. And those 12 and a half days are basically because he's either been in hospital, unconscious, in rehab, or in incarceration. That's the only reasons he's not drunk. They've worked out that he drinks like 92 units of alcohol per week, which in the UK would put him like 4 times over the recommended limit. He'd be like a category 3 alcoholic. Brilliant little. It's just like a quick point. Technically, through alcohol, what I found through alcohol, he should be dead at the age of 56.
Yeah.
And it's like he's also a spy that's getting shot at and poisoned on a regular basis. I'm sure his average life expectancy would be a lot less than that. But just made me think of it when we were thinking of popping pills to cure martini-induced hangovers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of small sample size, mouse study, but it made my ears perk up at the headache thing. You know, I don't get the massive hangers that I did when I was a younger man. I tend to be a bit more responsible, but every once in a while, you wake up a little crusty with that headache, and something like this would be
usually when you come to visit me. Flash, to be honest, I think those are the worst hangovers I've had.
Let's be real. That's
recently.
True. That's true. We get so used to social distancing that when we finally do get together, it's a bit of a party.
Exactly. Well, so speaking of that, should we summarise where we've been on this excursion today? So, and you just mentioned it there. So, Flash, you and I essentially have been socially distancing for, well, as you mentioned, 3 years. So, go us, effectively. Good news, if you have herpes, you might not get Zika. So, keep rubbing that cream in and hope for the best. Ironically, we almost forgot our story on memory cells. I say you, but I'll share the blame with you on that one. And fourthly, and obviously, we don't have lawyers, so I'll put a caveat around this, but keep drinking because a cure is on the way. That's basically what you've told us, Flash.
Yeah, we do need a quick note from the Too Bad For You legal department that we do not condone abuse of alcohol, and always enjoy responsibly.
Drink responsibly. Yeah. So that's where we've been today. Flash and I know we're very posh now, and we give this out at the start, but in case people have battled through this episode, they want to get in touch with the show, they can do so on Twitter or on Instagram at 2brad4you. You can in touch with me, Brad, at Bradley W. Hayes. Flash, if they want to hit you up, stalk you, get in touch, what do they do?
At bvampiredon. I'm open to all of that.
So yeah, listeners, we do this for you. Flash, it's been amazing as always. Listeners hopefully won't notice any difference, but we've actually used a new platform today, and I think it's worked really well. So I have to tip my hat to Flash because he's the brainchild of this. I literally just rock up and press record on whatever device he tells me to press record on.
It's better that way.
It is for everyone. Listeners, I will say, please stay safe. As I said before, listen to the advice being given. We can't afford to lose any of you. So stay safe, stay well for you, your families. Flash, you stay well, stay safe.
Right back at you, my friend.
And let's do this again soon.
I can't reuse the same joke even if nobody heard it except you.
Why not? There are some comedians that make a 25-year career out of reusing the same joke, and it wasn't even funny 25 years ago.
Yeah, well, I have something called integrity, my friend.
Well, I've got something called a mortgage to pay. So,
well, don't be banking on the podcast for that.
Well, yeah, I've noted. Yeah, I've yet to see any checks come in.
Me too. It's only been checks going out.
Yeah.